Are you ready to embrace a healthier, more vibrant life? Look no further than With Joy, a transformative movement and nutrition program that goes beyond the ordinary. We believe that true wellness encompasses mind, body, and spirit. We're here to elevate you to a place of health, wellness, and healing. Whether you're a seasoned athlete or just starting your fitness journey, we've got something for you. Our comprehensive programs include strength, mobility, endurance, and conditioning to elevate your fitness, recovery and recuperation for healing, and nutrition wellness plans to fuel your body for optimal performance. Check out our show notes for more information and links to our programs. Join the With Joy movement today and discover a whole new way to thrive.
Hi, I'm Joy Han Silva.
And I'm Laura Han Segundo Collins.
And welcome to Hahnacity.
Even before the podcast idea came up, we wanted to share how much we love you and we're so grateful for you in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Dang it, Laura.
There's tissue by the window, I think, because that's where I was sitting before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I obviously have such a positive effect.
You absolutely do. This is Joanne Bockian, owner of Stars Athletics in Southern California and our very first coach. So Joanne, if you don't mind starting at the very beginning, we would love to hear how you got into gymnastics.
Okay. When I was in third grade, I was living in Oregon at the time. We had a unit on tumbling in our PE class that I specifically remember trying to do at that point in time was a headstand. I was about as wide as I was high, and I would endeavor to do a headstand, and all I would do would be to just roll over on my back. No upper body strength, no balance, no coordination, perfect makings for a gymnast, right? So I would keep trying to do this headstand and keep rolling over like a little bug onto its back. So that's my introduction to gymnastics. I guess it was that following summer when we were moving down to California. We stayed with my maternal grandmother for a brief period of time while our parents were house hunting. And I believe that's where I saw a little episode on TV about firefighters. They were standing in tires that were about waist height, and they were bending backward while standing in the tire. And I thought, okay, that's like gymnastics. That's like a back bend, except they weren't touching the ground. So when I was 9, my first year in Southern California, my mom put me in a tap tumbling and ballet class. And apparently I excelled at the ballet, which I hated. The tap was okay, but what I really liked was the tumbling because I could push up into a back bend and the other kids in the class couldn't. And for a kid who was still as wide as she was high, that was a sense of accomplishment. So then began my love affair for the sport. From the age of about 8.5, when I kept rolling over trying to do a headstand, to age 9, when I was pushing up into a bridge, it kind of stuck. And now I'm 73 and it never really went away.
You can still do a back bend?
It depends on how many vertebrae I want to snap while attempting that.
Because I can't do a back bend anymore. So I think that's incredible.
Well, I don't know that I can anymore. The last time I did any meaningful gymnastics, I was in my 40s. So that was a few years back.
That's amazing.
That's how I got involved in gymnastics as a child.
And how did you get into coaching then?
When I was 14, I had done gymnastics in junior high, 7th and 8th grade. And I had picked up a few more skills than what I had when I was 8 and rolling over onto my back. I coached, if you will, or taught a couple of the neighborhood kids on the lawn. I have an interesting story about that, and I'll circle back to that in a moment. But that's basically how I started coaching. As I continued gymnastics through high school, I guess I continued teaching these kids stuff on the lawn, although I don't specifically remember that. I remember doing it when I was 14. When I went to college at age 17, I was in Pennsylvania. I found a gym in Center City, Philadelphia, where I could train, and they didn't charge me, but it was a train ride and a bus ride, subway ride out to where I was, not a great neighborhood. The following year, when I was 18, I contacted a local YMCA that did not have a program, and I said that I would set up a program for them and I would coach it in exchange for workout privileges. So they bought a set of uneven bars, and I'm not sure what all else. We started a little team right away, went to YMCA state championships that year, and our little team came in third in the state. And that was my official coaching debut, I guess, at age 18 in Pennsylvania. But circling back to when I was 14 and coaching on the lawn, there were twins who lived around the corner from us who were the same age, like literally 2 weeks apart from my sister, who's 3.5 years younger than I am. A number of years later, having long since lost touch with that family, I was at a clinic in Southern California where they were introducing the new gymnastics routines. And this woman stood next to me and she looked at me and she said, "Didn't you used to be Joanne Bockian?" It's like, okay, I don't have no idea who you are, but not only didn't I used to be Joanne Bockian, I'm pretty sure I still am. And I said, yes. And she looks at me and smiles brightly and she goes, "Don't you remember me?" Does this blank face look as though I remember you? She introduced herself and the name immediately clicked. She was one of the two twins. And I said, "What are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, you remember when you used to teach us gymnastics on the lawn? Well, I enjoyed that so much that when I had the opportunity, I enrolled my daughter in gymnastics. And now we're here learning the new routine." And
Oh
I
my
almost
gosh.
fell over where I stood.
That's
Yeah.
incredible.
The woman was probably in her 30s. The child was about 9. And I had not seen her that I can specifically recall since I went off to college. And I may not have seen her from even earlier than that. That was probably 20 years. It's not like we were reuniting at our high school or something like that, where you
Yeah.
look at somebody and you go, "Didn't you used to be, whoever it was from high
Yeah.
school?" This was in a different county, completely out of context. And for some strange reason,
Wow.
she recognized me. And that was her recollection, that she enjoyed the gymnastics on their lawn so much
Or
that now
maybe
her
you just
daughter,
had an incredible impact on her, Joanne, like you have with so
Yeah.
many. That could also be true.
but who knew?
Mm.
I mean, I was a young teenager
Mhm.
and I thought we were just playing gymnastics and having a good time. But I guess maybe that's what it's about.
Mhm.
That's a
Mhm.
good point. So, two things. One is, what is it like for you to know that you have such an impact on people? And secondly, who were your influences when you think of your own
Great
personality
coaches,
as a
yeah.
coach?
Okay, to answer the first question first, I never thought of myself as having an impact on anybody. I mean, the twin who bumped into me 20 years later, notwithstanding, that was kind of dumbfounding.
Mhm.
But I've never really thought of myself as somebody who has had a big impact on others. I just do what I do because I love it. I love the sport. I love working with kids. I'm hoping that I can give children a positive mindset so that they can approach life in the global sense, not just gymnastics life, but life with an can do attitude. Instead of making excuses why something can't be done, searching for a solution and a way to be able to do what it is they're trying to accomplish. That's sort of been my goal. But in terms of thinking that I've had a big impact on anybody, I can tell you one other person I may have had an impact on, and that's because I tutored her in math and got her from a flat out flunking grade to a B minus. But and she was in middle
Huge.
school or 6th grade, maybe at the time. She was one of my gymnasts, and we're still in touch. But in general, I don't feel that what I do has been particularly impactful on any one person who looks back and says, "Yeah, that was Joanne who did that." It was just kind of like They come, they go, they grow up. And hopefully I've had more of a positive impact on their lives than a negative one. What was the second half of the question? My coaching style. Okay. My first real club coach when I was in high school was the most affirming person. She just had this lovely coaching style where, how do you explain her? She wasn't overtly energetic in her encouragement, but she just quietly encouraged everybody all the time. It's kind of like, yeah, you can do it. Okay, that was a good try. You can do it. And I adored her. We're probably about 10 years apart. And to this day, I cannot call her by her first name. You know, she was always Mrs. P. So that was my first coach slash mentor. But a lot of my coaching style, at least my initial coaching style, I developed from another club owner for whom I volunteered for about 7 years. Laura, this is where I met you. And that club owner's coaching style was very different. I think a lot of times his team athletes attempted skills that he wanted them to throw because they were more afraid of him than they were of the skill.
Yeah.
I saw kids doing dive rolls over the old wood and metal individual desk chairs that had the desk part in front of the chair. I mean, those things were like steel and wood. And if you clobbered into that thing, there would be blood.
Yeah.
And they were, I think, more afraid of him than they were of doing a dive roll over that obstacle. It was not a healthy situation. I learned a fair amount about spotting different skills, but I learned, if you will, from that coach that the way you get something out of a child is to be tough on them. And I have since found out that that is not necessarily a good approach. It's not necessarily the best approach. There are times that coaches do have to be tough, but there are ways of being tough without destroying a child.
Yeah.
And without putting a child's safety at risk. That took me a while to sort out in my own mind. And the thing that took me the longest to sort out, which kind of came as a revelation to me just a couple of years back, was the difference between gymnastics as a sport and gymnastics as an activity. There are kids who want to do gymnastics as an activity because they think it's fun to be able to jump up on the bar and do a forward roll off. And there are kids who want to do gymnastics as a sport because, as one gymnast that I think was in Joy's generation put it, I was born to compete. I had always figured that you went to gymnastics because you wanted to compete in gymnastics. That's why you went there. But not necessarily true.
Yeah.
I mean, I always had a club that had a team. You joined as a beginner, you went to the advanced beginners, you went to the pre-team, then you went to the team, and that was just the natural progression of things. It wasn't a matter of you learned how to do a kip because kips are fun. You learned how to do a kip because it was a part of the bar routine at your level and you needed to know how to do it. The whole purpose of having a gym and enrolling gymnasts was to get them to a team level. Well, maybe the purpose of gymnastics is to allow anyone who wants to participate in the sport.
Yes.
Those were the two biggest influences on my coaching. One who was affirming, and I've come full circle, I hope, back to that. And the other one who was, I'll say tough, but that's probably being kind, maybe tough to the point of being abusive. And that showed me, I mean, the toughness showed me how to be tough as a coach, but the abusiveness showed me something that I don't ever want to have happen in my gym.
Yeah.
Whether it's by me or any of my other coaching staff.
Yeah.
And Laura, that's where you started, was that location with that club owner.
Yeah. Which maybe we can segue to that. Hands down, I have a drips and drabs memory. I think gymnastics for me was about 6 years of my life, and it's really small. And a lot happened in those 6 years. You are absolutely the holder of a lot of my memories in those early years. I remember being with you and learning back and front walkovers in some area that was above the gym. Like gym was like sunken into the floor of a church, but there was an area that we just had as the little mini team. I remember that being some of the most fun that I ever had because I just wanted to get the skill. Whatever you gave to me, I wanted to learn. But maybe you could share how we met, which was really fun.
I will share that, but I need to correct you on one thing. I did not teach you a back walkover.
I didn't.
I
You did?
I will relate that story.
Okay.
You came into the gym one Saturday morning to do a makeup class. This might have been like February or March. So you were a young six. You came in, you did a makeup,
I was
and
a very young and a very hyper six. I will completely own that.
I don't mean young like immature. I mean young like not much past six.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
I had you in my class because it was a makeup. I wasn't familiar with your skill level. So I asked you, do you know how to do a cartwheel? Yes, you knew how to do a cartwheel. And I said, okay, now we're going to work on back walkovers. And you threw a back walkover. And it was like, have you ever done that before? No.
Oh,
Okay. So I guess maybe I taught you, quote unquote, taught, but not really because you just threw the thing. And it's like, where did this child come from? And how come nobody's noticed her before? So that was the end of that. I mean, you came in for your makeup, you did your makeup, and you left. But you also left a lasting impression. So I went through that club's roster of all enrolled gymnasts. There were several hundred. And here my bias is showing or my prejudice, and you can tell me how wrong I was at that time to jump to that conclusion. But I looked at your face, and what struck me was, okay, this child is Asian descent.
yeah.
I went through that entire roster multiple times. It never occurred to me to look for a segundo.
Right.
That just never even crossed my mind. So here I am going through this roster, could not find you anywhere. One day, and maybe another couple of months had passed, you came back in for another Saturday makeup. You walked in and you were on that upper level. To get into that gym from the street level, you had to go down a flight of stairs.
Right.
And then there was another lower level where the main gym was. And I had gone from that lower gym level up to the balcony to try to catch a parent, not yours. And here you come walking in. And I think my eyes must have popped out of my head. And I said, there you are. Don't move. I'll be right back. And I ran off to grab this parent. And I came back and you were standing exactly as I had left you in mid step with one leg up in the air and one arm forward. You had not moved. I said, okay, you can put your foot down or something like that. And you did. And that's when I spoke with you and your mom about being able to work with you more often. It was like, no, you're not leaving again. And this time I'm going to get your whole name. So that's how I met you. But I can't say that I taught you about back walkover because that was one of the things that absolutely floored me, that I could not top you out in that first makeup class. That everything I asked you to do, you already were doing. And I kept asking you to do what I thought would be more and more challenging or difficult things. And you did them as though I was wasting your time. Not with a bad attitude, but it's like, why am I doing this baby trick? Okay, fine. She wants me to do it. I'll do it. And then the next thing, okay, we're still in the baby tricks. And then the next thing, well, no, I haven't done that before, but why don't you ask me to do something hard? So that's how I met you.
That's phenomenal. And do you remember when you met Joy?
I met Joy for the first time when she was about the same age as you were when I first met you. And my recollection is she took one look at me and ran screaming in the opposite direction. She wanted absolutely nothing to do with me. Love you, Joy. Absolutely nothing. And I could not get her to enroll in my gym. Seriously.
So it's funny because my memory had nothing to do with you. I remember taking a class with you and Laura, but I was doing cartwheels on the beam. And I remember making every cartwheel, and you had asked to do probably a similar thing, like a kinder gym class or whatever. I was pretty young. We were doing basics on floor, and the girls behind me, who eventually became some of my teammates at Foothill, started yelling at me because I didn't know how to do a certain skill. I think it was a back extension roll. I had no idea what the heck that was. I stood there and I froze. It felt like an hour, and the girls were like, go, go. And that was the thing that scared me. That was the narrative in my head. And that is why I ran and said, no more. It wasn't Joanne. It was being embarrassed because I didn't know what the skill was.
Wow.
Yeah.
And here I thought it was just this magical effect that I had on small children. Anyway, you came back to me a couple of years later.
Well, it's because I was chucking things in the house, and my parents thought I was going to break my neck, because that one over there would throw my body into things that probably I shouldn't have done. And I would try things on my own, and they were terrified. So they're like, no, you need to go to gymnastics to learn how to do gymnastics. You can't just throw cartwheels on the side of the couch and hope that you live. That's essentially why they're like, let's go find Joanne again.
Well, when I got you back, you stuck around for a little bit longer that time.
I did.
You
it wasn't you.
Well, I just figured, with the added maturity that you get by the time you're like 8, you can handle me better. Speaking of cartwheels on the beam and joy, do you recall what your flight pass was when you were like 11 and you were a level 8?
I do, because you reminded me recently, but I did not remember before that.
You were crazy. Nobody does what you did. I have never seen it before or since. One-armed back handspring with your right arm, one-armed back handspring with your left arm, alternating arm back handsprings in a series. I've never seen anybody before you or after you in all of my years of coaching throw that pass. Ever.
That's really cool.
Ever.
Actually.
That's insane.
Oh,
anyway,
awesome.
So much for your beam work. I mean, you obviously grew up to be a beam worker. Now, if you could have just straightened your legs on those things. Well, bent knees are a deduction. What can I tell you? But it was a crazy pass. So, yeah, that's how I met Joy. And I'm going to digress for a moment about children throwing skills in the house. In Southern California, there was 20 plus years back, a little boy who would jump up and down on his parents' bed and throw back tucks and stuff on the bed until one day he broke the bed. Oh. And his parents said, that's it. No more jumping on the bed. We're getting you a trampoline. So they got him a trampoline in the backyard. That little boy grew up to be a 3-time trampoline Olympian.
Wow.
Whoa, that's amazing.
From breaking the bed to representing the U.S. in
That's
3
really
Olympics
cool.
as a trampolinist.
That's awesome.
And coaches trampoline, and is probably one of the best coaches I have ever met. Right now, I actually take a lot of how I coach from watching him, even though he's a little more than a third my age. But he coaches everything from little tiny 4, 5, 6-year-old beginner tots to the next crop of Olympians. And he is equally kind and reaffirming to all of them. He takes the littlest ones and makes them feel proud of themselves.
Absolutely.
And he makes corrections to the older ones in a positive way without demeaning the athlete. He just simply analyzes the skill and explains to them why throwing your head on a backflip does not work in terms of the physics of the skill. It has everything to do with offering an explanation in a way that they can understand. I am actually trying to adapt my coaching style to be more like him, because he is one of my coach heroes. And no, I've never told him that. I probably should, and I will.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I have told him that he is an amazing coach, and I love watching him coach. But I'll give him a little bit more explanation as to why when I see him this coming season. But yeah, so that's my story about, child jumping on the bed. So Don't let your kids jump on beds. They may grow up to be Olympians.
That just goes to show you as a lifelong student and constantly evolving your style. And I love how you take the things that are already your fundamentals, which is finding the best in people. I mean, I'm sure every gymnast who's ever been with you at some point when we were kids got the don't say I can't. Yes, you can. Let's figure it out. Let's work it out. But you have been in this sport for decades and you have seen so many things over time. How is it going? What would you like to see different? Are things getting better? And what do you think?
You're referring to the sport in general on a global basis?
Yeah.
Yes.
First of all, and this is not necessarily the most important thing, but it's one of the biggest changes, has been the equipment. When I did gymnastics, it was called floor exercise because we did it on a floor. And I'm talking about a hardwood basketball court floor.
Mm-hmm.
And mats were those gray horsehair mats with the knots tied through them. I don't know if you've ever seen those in some museum of ancient gymnastics equipment, but that's what a mat was. When spring floors first came into existence, there were little 2-inch springs fastened to plywood, and that made up the floor. And now the springs are 4 inches. They are wider as well as taller. The floors are fiberglass, so they're much more resilient.
Wow.
And instead of a thin layer of soft foam on top of that, there's now a couple of inches of crosslink foam on top. So it's very, very resilient in terms of being able to absorb the shock of landings, which is one reason why skills have been able to develop and get so much harder on floor. Balance beams have shock absorbers on the end. They are padded. I grew up with hardwood balance beams fastened to a steel frame. There was no resilience, no give. And if you fell onto one of those things, it actually hurt a lot.
Mm-hmm.
In addition, the deduction for falls has been reduced. It used to be a full point off for falls. So you didn't do things that you weren't pretty sure were rock solid in your routine because the penalty was pretty severe if you missed. So if you can get your feet on and you're landing safely, but if you're a little bit off and need to jump down, it still encourages people to try those skills in a competitive routine, where before it was like, well, you've got an 80% chance of making it, don't throw it. You got a 99% chance of making it, go ahead and throw it. Techniques have gotten better. When I was doing gymnastics early on, we were always told, arch your back harder. You're not bending enough. And now the emphasis is on stretching shoulders so that there's not as much pressure put on the backs of young gymnasts, which apparently have led to problems as they grew up. I had significant back problems when I was competing at UCLA and ended up rehabbing it without the need for surgery, which had been recommended, actually. I don't have residual problems from that, but apparently there are a number of gymnasts from my era who do, and it was because of the emphasis of arching the back as opposed to stretching the shoulders. Strength was not nearly as large a component back in the day, and the knowledge there has expanded tremendously over the years as well. I knew I needed a certain amount of strength to do certain skills, but there was never really a conditioning program as part of my training. We did splits all the time because you had to be able to do splits. We did back bends all the time because you had to be able to bend your back. The strength to control that flexibility and the strength to make certain moves easier so you put less stress on your back, that didn't really exist then. And that has been a huge improvement. There have been bumps in the road along the way. It went through a particularly hellacious period of time when there was a lot of, and I'm getting this information secondhand. I did not witness a lot of it after that first gym, Laura, where you started. I did witness abuse there, but apparently there was much more significant abuse on a much more widespread level nationwide in the sport, trying to get female athletes, and I don't know about the men, but female athletes to a level where they would become world and Olympic champions. That I would like to think has been, if not completely eliminated from our sport, because I don't believe that it has been completely eradicated, at least tremendously, significantly reduced, and is no longer being tolerated or accepted as this is what the athlete needs to go through if they want to get to a high level. I don't think that that has ever been required, but I think that in this country, at least, and I don't know about other countries, probably in some other countries, significantly similar. I think there were a lot of athletes who were sacrificed to the goal of gold rather than developed as an athlete and as a person. So hopefully that has changed.
Wow.
I tell my kids, in order to be a good gymnast, first you have to be a good person. Then you have to be a good athlete. And then you can be a good gymnast.
Well said.
Thank you.
Are you overwhelmed, stuck, maybe disconnected in your relationship? Would you like to find more clarity and balance? Look no further than Laura Collins, LCSW, providing individual and couples counseling with warmth and empathy, a safe space to navigate life's challenges and connect you with your shine. Laura also specializes in working with current and former athletes and coaches, performance anxiety to post-competition transition. She understands the unique mental demands of the sports world. Curious to dive deep? Check out the links in our show notes for additional information about our practice and how we can support you in your journey.
There's a lot I'm just soaking it in right now.
I think you were part of that time period where athletes were sacrificed with the hope that those who survived would go out and win gold.
Absolutely.
I've got to tell you, Laura, I still feel such a sense of responsibility for the negative aspects of what you went through. And I know you have said, and you continue to say, it wasn't you, it wasn't you, it wasn't you. But if I hadn't pushed and encouraged you to move away from the gym where I was coaching, and you hadn't listened to that, and you hadn't moved on to other places, what would have been the difference in the outcome? If I hadn't encouraged you to go.
I just want to say this, Joanne, because you had said that the gym prior to Laura leaving home also had abusive tactics. She would have still be in an environment that was abusive, that had nothing to do with you, whether or not she left that gym or she stayed.
Okay, but here's the thing. At the end of her state championship meet, when she was a class 3, when she was 8, we went out to dinner afterwards. I don't know if you remember that, Laura. We went out to dinner, your parents and I honestly don't remember if Natalie was there or not, but my guess is she was. And I flat out told your parents, you need to get her out of this gym, because that gym had, again, it was that, go for the gold. It was that mentality. That gym held athletes back so that they could have a team that would go out and win state championships. And I could see Laura being held back until they had enough kids at her level to be able to go out and win another state championship, and not being moved up and progressing until that happened. When we went out to dinner, I said to your parents, Laura, you need to get this child out of this gym. And that's where it started.
It's not your fault.
I'm not blaming myself per se, but I take a certain amount of responsibility for it. You can what if something to death, but what would have happened if we hadn't had that conversation? What would have happened if I had said, Laura, I want you to train with me forever. Stay with me forever. Don't
You would have
ever
been my
leave.
teammate, Joanne. That's what I would
have stayed with you forever, Joanne.
Are you familiar with another elite gymnast, full ride to UCLA? I started her when she was 3. She left when she was 9, and she ended up training at Gymnastics. I met one of her coaches at the state meeting when the elites were being honored, which happens every year. Coach was there, and I introduced myself and I said, thank you for what you've done with her and for her. I was her first coach when she was little. And he looked at me and he said, good basics. That's one of the highest compliments I've ever received, especially from an elite coach. And that's what I do well. But I know my limitations and I don't coach at the elite level. I don't have that skill set. Could I develop that skill set? Maybe, possibly. But do I want to take the time to develop that skill set now? I don't. I wouldn't mind hiring somebody with that skill set to be able to work with my athletes who are headed that direction, but I don't have that skill set. And I knew then that I did not have the skill set, Laura, to get you to a level that I knew you could achieve. And I didn't say where to go. I suggested several options, as I recall, but staying with me and progressing were oxymorons. It was a choice of, do I kiss you goodbye at the age of not yet 9 and wish you the best? Or do I dig my nails into you and hold on to you, knowing that I could not get you where you had the talent to go? So do I blame myself? No, not really. But do I take a lot of responsibility for what ended up happening with you after you left? I do, because if I hadn't pushed you out the door, if I hadn't gotten you the Caroli's camp week at Christmas, what might have happened differently?
I still can't believe you got
I
me
don't
that.
know.
I can't believe you got me that.
I know, now I'm
That
crying.
winter camp.
Like,
I don't regret it. I don't.
That helps a
Especially
lot.
now. At 46 now, and looking back
You're
to
46?
we've known each other 40 years. You've meant so much to me for 40 years.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
40 years is a long time.
It's a long time. I can't speak for Joy, but I know from my own journey for many, many years, decades, is that I really thought I failed. I took it upon myself. I failed. I wasted everyone's time. I wasted my own time. I really took it personally that I did something wrong. And I was sort of in the dark. I had dealt with the depression from that for a long, long time. I'm so lucky to have such a loving community around me, including you, Joanne and Joy. But really, it was once I had kids. I don't even think I processed a lot of this experience when I was in therapy, but it's when I had kids. And my kids right now are at the ages of when I was going through this prolific gymnastics career. One of my sons has just turned 9, the other one is 12. And the one who's at 9 is when I was starting to sort of skyrocket in the world of gymnastics. And 12 is when my life fell apart. It was about a couple of years ago during COVID. And I remember talking with my older son. He was 10 then. And I thought, gosh, this is the time I had that experience of breaking my arm, which when I look back, the first of the 2 major events that happened, that wasn't just about the injury, it was about what led up to that injury and how that sort of hyper, super fun loving little girl that I used to be started really changing in this dynamic with that particular coach at that particular gym. And I looked at my son and I remember thinking to myself, God, if somebody said that to him, the things that that person said to me, the things that he said to my teammates, the way that he treated other adults, if that were a person in my life right now, that would be over because I'm the parent. And it was the first time in my life that I ever said that was abusive. It was through the lens of being a parent and wanting to protect and think about how I want to raise this kid, what I want him to see in the world, how I want him to feel, who's going to be around him. And that's when I said it for the first time. I remember kind of testing it out in certain places. Some people were like, well, yeah, Laura, hello, definitely. And for some other people, especially old teammates, this is the first time that we're even sharing it with each other because you're so trained to not think of it that way. You're trained to think of it as something you did. You're wrong. You're the problem. That's gaslighting. So now we're getting to see with this wider perspective and get to reclaim and maybe own for the first time that, no, we were really exceptional little girls with this incredible talent. There's a limitation, I think, of that culture, of that time, being kids of the 80s, being raised by parents of the 60s and 70s, that, emotions and thoughts, there's no space for those things, not for our older generation, not for you, not for us. So to just kind of create it and own it is not going to come naturally. It takes work. And that has come later, which I'm really glad that our generation's now seeing these incredible gymnasts being able to utilize their voices, tennis players and soccer players, and these phenomenal athletes being able to say those things and have male presenting sports support that in women's athletics is freaking awesome. But it came at the cost and sacrifice of so many before. And yes, Joy and I are absolutely a part of that. But now I look back and I see that we are steps in a chronology, and we put up with a lot, and we're strong. To me, I look at that story of you buying a week of winter camp at Crowley's for me because California wasn't enough for Laura in your eyes. I mean, I just feel so loved by you because nobody would have seen that except for you. The coaches that I had at the gym after the gym I had with you, they didn't see that. I was sitting there doing basics for like a year. And by the end of that year, you were supposed to have sort of made a team or didn't make a team. And I was bored of doing basics over and over again. I wanted to get out there and figure out what the next shine was going to be because I felt like I mastered those skills. I wanted to dance more. I wanted to flip around more. I wanted to do the next thing. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for you. So that winter camp, when I think of that, because that whole week was super fun, it was great. And that ended with, at some point in the week, Bella Caroli had come up to me and asked if I would do like an evaluation or some kind of special workout. And I did. And I thought it was fun. It was just, everything was always fun. By the end of that, they invited me to stay in Houston to train with them. When I think about Bella and those other coaches, there's lots of expletives that I can use. And also sprinkled in there are really incredible people that are the fundamentals of who I am as a person today, which is love and empowerment. And, you know, I'm constantly running with this idea of imposter syndrome. But on the other hand, I also know I'm a fully capable person that can tackle anything. All the things that you wanted for your athletes: problem solve, goal set, say you can, focus on it, have a little moment. You're going to have a moment when you cry or you whatever, but then like, let's get back up and keep going. I do that today, large in part because of what you put into me as my coach. So if anything, I thank you.
Thank you for that. You have no idea how much that means. Now let me tell you a story about after that evaluation at Caroli's. You said you wanted to go there, and your sister told me to test you out. She said, I don't know about that. Maybe we shouldn't do it. And your response was, I'm going to train there if I have to walk. I'm going to go train there even if I have to walk. Well, apparently you didn't have to walk.
Yeah.
And then was another thing that happened when you were just a little bit older than that. When you were competing up in California, Northern California. I hadn't seen you for a couple of years. Were you 11?
I think so, maybe.
Long around then, you were
yeah.
elite. And it was a big meet. And I could not get there for the meet. But
American Classic. It was American Classic in Oakland, 1989.
Okay, and I flew up to see you because I hadn't seen you for a while because you were in Texas and I was in California. Mm-hmm. But now you're in California, so I could see you. So I flew up, and the point I was trying to make was that what was important to me was not how you scored at a meet. What was important to me was you. I judged trampoline and tumbling, and I had judged a little girl who, as a teenager, had to make the decision whether she was going to pursue artistic gymnastics or TNT, and she did both. And she had actually gone to World Age Group Championships in TNT, but there aren't college scholarships for it. So she ended up concentrating on gymnastics. In one of her early gymnastics meets as either a level 10 or an elite, she bombed. And her mom said, how do you feel about that? Her response was, Mom, if I let one set of scores in one meet define who I am, I would have quit this sport long ago. And I'm hoping that my kids who compete can have that mindset, that you are not what your scores are. To be a good gymnast, first you have to be a good person. That's who you are. Then you have to be a good athlete. Then you can be a good gymnast. But a set of scores does not define you. If I had had that little quote from that little girl back when you were a kid, I would have told you that then. But I didn't have that quote then because that was like a decade ago. And you were already like a grown-up by then. But what an absolutely insightful comment from a child. Scores don't define you. Who you are as a human being defines you.
Yeah. And if people are listening and they don't know what's going on, it's because I friggin' bombed. bombed. I don't even remember how I bombed. I just know I bombed. American Classic was the first junior B, my first elite meet. And I was pretty little and I friggin' bombed. And Joanne showed up to the hotel. And there's this picture of us, which I remember hugging you and being like, oh my God, just the relief. It was relief.
I had no idea.
You know, at the time, that kind of a place was, if you did poorly, there was a kind of a being ostracized when you got back. So knew in my head, I had to go back to the gym and I had to just deal with this feeling of I failed. And I know that's part of the process that they would say you have to get through. That's why they want you to start young. But when you showed up to Oakland, and I was feeling so much as a kid, I couldn't say it. Smile on the outside, hold it all on the inside. But I remember hugging you. You have a very distinct Joanne smell that it brings me a lot of relief. Yeah, you do.
You still have a Joanne.
You
smell.
do.
It's comforting.
Oh, if anybody could
I
be
don't
so
care.
lucky to hug Joanne, that it's a very, you'll smell this really wonderful, I'm safe and I'm secure smell to me. And if I know for Joy too.
The smell for that?
Yeah, it's called Joanne. Spray it.
Aw.
If
If I bottle it, will I make a lot of money?
I hope so. You should. You deserve it.
Okay. we'll market it and just call it Joanne.
Ooh, I love it. The Bockian.
Okay.
Joanne,
Love
I have
that.
a question, actually. I
Yeah.
have a question about, because I didn't get to see Joy in her splendor. I saw some, but not too much, just because we were in different paths. And she was with you for some time, just kicking ass, and then moved to Posars. Can you share with us a little bit about, and I say this with love, Joy, but Joy doesn't always recognize like what an amazing gymnast she was. She doesn't always believe it. I know that's a common thing that happens, I think, with gymnasts during our time, but sometimes she doesn't believe just like how talented, how beautiful, how wonderful she was.
She was crazy. Nobody throws a one-arm back handspring on beam, let alone two of them, let alone alternating arms. I'm sorry I keep coming back to that, but Joy, really?
Yeah.
Who does that? That goes back to that consistency thing. You don't throw things in a meet that you're not consistent on in the gym. You threw it in meets because you were consistent as all get out.
Mm.
Who does that? That is my strongest memory of a quiet little girl who was just off the charts nuts. I mean, who knew? You look at her and she's like this sweet, quiet little thing. And she was very, I would say, compliant. You ask her to do something and she doesn't argue with you and she does it and she works hard and she was talented. And talent and hard work will get you pretty far in anything. This sport, life, pick one, that's a kind of a winning combination. But you wouldn't have suspected the iron core from the soft exterior.
And to go to Posars, what was the transition for that?
I'm not really sure. Joy, I'm sure you've got a better recollection than I do. If I was part of that decision-making process, I don't recall that I was. Very often kids will recognize that they may be at the top of their game in the gym where they are, and they don't see anybody more advanced than they are. And it's like, okay, if I really want to progress, I need to go somewhere where I'm not the top dog. There are other people who are better than I am, and I can learn from them and I can watch them and I can be trained by whoever trained them.
Right. So interesting because me and Laura talked about this morning right before we got on with you.
That's recent.
Yeah, really recent. The Olympics felt like the ultimate dream. And that was something that at a very young age, that was what I wanted to do. So pretty determined. I probably didn't vocalize it, but that was something that was really important to me. So when I was starting to excel with you and started getting into a higher level, I think it was sort of that aspect of like, what do I need to do in order to make that Olympics? What happened in 1992 that not many people remember is Bella Crowley announced his retirement. He didn't have the Olympics that he had expected.
And I think in my mind, probably because Laura went to Crowley's and also just the culture of USA gymnastics. Bella Crowley was the god.
So when he announced this retirement, I was like, where do I go after that? And it just so happened is that what my parents did a lot of the times was to go to Laura's parents and ask, well, what did you do with Laura? And Rick Newman, who is Bella Crowley's top assistant coach, had moved out to Posars to train girls out there. And that was sort of the natural step that we would do an evaluation. And that's how that came about. Do you remember that night or have any memories of like how we came to you and told you that I was going to be going to Posars?
No.
This is like the first time I have memories and you don't. So I
Maybe
remember.
I just block out the sad stuff.
So I remember you would pick me up from school, and I have a story to tell you later on about my brother, because my brother and I had talked about you recently too.
Which brother?
My younger brother.
Jonathan?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So we had invited you to dinner, which was common. You would take me home after practice, or I felt like you were an extended member of our family. You had dinners with us. You went to a lot of things in our house. And I remember my parents wanted to talk to you privately, and I was upstairs in my room playing. And they had told you that I went to this evaluation and had explained to you that they were thinking of letting me move to Sacramento. And I remember they called me down to come and tell you. You gave me a big hug and you told me if you didn't come up with this decision, I would have told you eventually to move on. That's what you said to me.
And that goes back to my saying before, I know what my limitations are. It's like the baby bird flapping its wings. You know, at some point in time, if it's going to fly, you got to push it out of the nest.
Was there ever a time that you wanted to bring a gymnast to that level?
There were many times I wanted gymnasts to be able to achieve that level, but not where I wanted to personally hold on to them long enough to see if I was good enough to get them to that level. That's a whole different thing. As long as I felt I could still develop the athlete. If I liked the kid and liked the family, I wanted him to stay in the gym. And if they left while I felt that I could still offer them something, that made me sad. I mean, it was a matter of time that, you know, okay, if they left after they were a level 8, I could have gotten them through level 9, maybe not through level 10, and definitely not to elite. But maybe I could have had them for one more year, one more season. I could have trained them one more period of time and still had that kid in my life. And now I don't. So there's that. But did I ever want to hold on to a kid, you know, like there goes my little elite? No. I like to think that my ego's not that big, that if we're really doing what's best for the child, then what the coach wants for the coach needs to be second, not first. And have I ever wanted to take a kid to elite? Not really, because I don't have that skill set and I know it. Have I ever wanted to see a kid become elite? Absolutely, because I knew they had the ability. And those are two different things. Good question, but two different things.
Yeah. So important to know about oneself.
Can we do like a quick fire comment about our favorite memory about Joanne?
Uh-oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Joy.
So learning a kip in gymnastics, as any gymnast would know, is like one of the hardest skills to get. It's kind of like once you get it, you never lose it type of thing. And it took me forever to get my kip. I probably competed my first couple level 5 meets without a kip. And I remember I finally did it. And the person who I heard the loudest, because it took me forever, was you. And you were like on the other side of the gym, jumping up and down, clapping your hands. And I just remember I thought I was so proud that I had this skill, but Joanne was really, really proud that I finally got my kip. And that's pretty much how you responded every time I got a new skill, was that my loudest cheerleader in the gym was always you. And even though the girls, my teammates, were excited for me, the voice I heard was yours. And so thank you for always being my biggest cheerleader. So.
All right, now I'm going to have to reach for the Kleenex.
Yeah.
Again, I have such drips and drabs memories. It's all snapshots. but I have a snapshot of you wearing a cheerleading shirt for me. Remember
Proud
it-
to be Laura's coach. I still have the shirt.
Where was that? When
That was your state meet class 3, the one where you were the youngest competitor in the age group. The shirt was maroon and the letters were either white or cream color. I haven't seen the shirt for a couple of years now, but I still do have it. And across the top, it said proud to be. And then underneath that in bigger letters, Laura's coach. Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Really quickly, I recently had a conversation with my younger brother, John, because me and my brother have never talked about my gymnastics experience. He'd never really heard me or Laura's story. And we were talking about you specifically on how much of an impact you were on our lives, because you didn't just invest in us as athletes, you invested us as human beings. It was really important for you to know us and to pour into us that was beyond gymnastics. When I think about my gymnastics career, there's very little that you get credit for, and it's actually way bigger than you really think. And you have a bigger impact on who I am today than any of my other coaches did. My younger brother said, Joanne absolutely invested in you because she invested in me. He remembers those multiple afternoons after school when our parents were working. You picked us up and he had us sit in a gym, and a lot of his life was sacrificing for my gymnastics career. What he remembered the most was that you would go and say, do you want to bounce on the trampoline? And you would put him on a spotting belt. He said, that was so much fun. And Joanne saw me and didn't want me sitting around waiting for you, and saw that I was still a kid. She had me do trampoline classes. She would go and put me in this belt. She'd have me jump and she'd make me do flips and all these things. And it was because of the heart that Joanne had. He was like, she absolutely invested in you and in our family, and she is by far a huge impact on all of us. So you don't just impact the athlete, you impact the families. When I think about when I was away and I had to tell my parents where I needed extra grips or tape or pre-wrap, or I was running out of things because I couldn't tell these families that I lived with that I needed stuff, they would always go to you, and you always met up with them and provided things that they needed to send out to me. You were their go-to person when it came to my career as well. You were a huge support for our family, and we thank you so much for that.
Isn't that funny? I don't remember that either.
But this is the impact that you have on people.
We have a lot of
This is
pictures
how
of
magical you are.
lots of family gatherings with you there.
Yeah, we have pictures of you at our family gatherings.
Well, send them over.
Yes.
I want an album. I wasn't kidding about the pictures. I'd love to see them sometime.
I will definitely
Will do,
forward
yeah.
them. I just found them myself, finally picking up stuff from my sister's house that she stored for me all these years and sending them to my home. Now getting to
So
go
do I
through
need to
them.
come out to New York to look at the pictures?
Well,
Send them to me.
why don't you do that?
You
Because that
should,
would be
yeah.
fun anyway. And then you'll
Oh my
see
gosh.
the little one is going to bounce all over you like I did when I was 9.
Maybe you can teach them a flip.
So thank you for everything. Thank you for being in our hearts, in our lives, and being part of our family.
Mm-hmm.
And you're still doing it, right? I mean, you're still impacting so many more than you know through Stars Athletics. And
I hope.
maybe we'll hold that for you. You're so modest. So the rest of us will hold it for you, how fantastic you are and how impactful you are as you continue to share your love, joy, and knowledge and strength with all your kids. And if every coach was like you, from the basics to the elite level, I mean, we would have, I don't even know, United States, all sports would be like conquering the world, and also in just a loving, wonderful, and powerful way.
Thank you. So when I have self-doubt, I should contact you.
Yeah.
Yes,
Speed
100%.
dial.
Yep. This is the
Okay.
Hahnacity
Be
community.
careful what you agree to. You may end up getting taken up on that.
Fabulous. This is what Hahnacity is all about. We are building a community that is believing in lifting one another up and bringing out the best in each other so that we can do this for ourselves as well. Because like we said, this sort of expectation that the kids themselves are going to just magically say like, yeah, I can do it and believe in ourselves. Yes, let's do it. But it really does take a community to remind each other that we're worth it and we can. So heck yeah, absolutely call anytime, and we'll be doing the same for you too.
Yeah.
Okay. I love you guys.
We love you.
Love you so much.
Well, thank you,
Take-
Joanne.
You're welcome. Take care of yourselves.
Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, please reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and our website, Hahnacity.com.
Share and follow us on Amazon and Spotify. Help us out and leave a 5-star review. Thanks.